when I was asked to address this topic, I was sort of intrigued by all the different areas that I could go with it, because the quest to feel good, that pretty much leaves it open. And since the initial assignment, I'll be honest with you, it's gone 4 or 5 different directions. And what I've done is decided to just kind of go back to a kind of a safe foundation, perhaps. But also, as I was listening to take in the introduction, it sort of captures why I think in these terms. So many of you know, for the last 10 years now, close to 10 years, I've been working with veterans. And it really is proven to be a very unique experience for me. So for all these years, I sort of talked theory, did a little bit of private practice on the side. Now I've really immersed myself in clinical intervention. I'm having, 36 hours of contact a week pretty consistently. So where I'm going with the quest to feel good is coming from these experiences. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint. You can't do a presentation without a PowerPoint anymore. So let me get mine on the screen. All right, so here's our topic, the quest to feel good. Many of you know that I wrote a book on the quest to feel good. If you haven't bought it, here's the plug, please do. But I'm not really going to address that topic. For those of you that know, that book sort of addresses the adaptive purpose of emotions. And today I want to talk about other things. Most of us in this group are doing some form of counseling, some form of intervention. And the point I want to make is that everybody that comes to see us because they're in some state of distress. Things aren't quite right in their life. If things were fine, if their lifestyle was being fulfilled by the circumstances of their life, they wouldn't be coming to see us. They come to see us because they want to get someplace. And where is it that they want to get? Well, I've made the point in publications and elsewhere that until and unless we get them to the point of feeling good about their life, good being a little bit vague, admittedly, we haven't necessarily met their objective. A lot of times people will leave counseling because they feel better. We haven't really done anything. But the point that I want to make is that people come to us in some state of distress, and then we take them on a journey. And hopefully this journey gets them where they want to be. Perhaps it's happiness. That can be a little bit misleading. Perhaps if we read this picture here closely, it would be self-fulfillment, which is an interesting concept, or just some sense of fulfillment, which is a term that I have recently been struggling with. And maybe when we have a discussion, we can talk a little bit about why I struggle with that. So basically, people come to see us because they feel bad, they want to feel better. And as Adlerians, we have some, I think, creative and useful ways to get them to that point. But let me do a little exercise with you all, and let's get you to just think for a moment. I've done this with some of you before, and just think about what you want in life. And as you think about that, I think you're going to be a little bit vague. Now, some of you will be very, very specific. I want X, Y, and Z. Some of you will be somewhat vague and say things like, I want a sense of fulfillment. And you sort of say that as if you were clear on what that meant and don't want to assume that you don't. But what I found over the years is when people say things like, I want to feel fulfilled, I want to feel, pleased with my life, they really don't have sort of a sense of what it takes to get there. And so that's the point of this exercise. So when you think about what you want, all right, ask yourself the question, why do I want that? And the point that I want to make is that you want that because somehow you have associated that with feeling good. Whatever good means to you, you have equated to that outcome, to that feeling that you desire. How are you fulfilled? When are you satisfied? When whatever it is that you want, you have, okay? But you might also be still a little bit uncertain of what you want. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you. And many of you know of my idea of the desired state, but some of you don't. So I want to think for a moment about your desired state. And the point of this, every morning, we all get up hoping to fulfill our desired state. Now, we don't often know what that is, but roughly it's the feeling of some contentment, some satisfaction. So what I want you to do, and language and visual on this may make it a little bit challenging, but if you can see the words on this word jumble, I want you to see if you can find 2 or 3 words on there that stand out and resonate to you more than others. I think I can probably enlarge that. Well, that doesn't help. So let's see, bring it up a little bit. There you go. See if you can find 2 or 3 or 4 words on that list that just stand out more to you than others, that sort of resonate. So let me just stop for a second and let you ponder those terms. Write them down if you have a chance. Now, the interesting thing is you pick your words. In a lot of ways, you are essentially doing your own little mini lifestyle analysis. What you have picked says something about you. If you're a person who picked admiration, it says that you have a desire to be appreciated, for people to acknowledge your existence. If what you want is joy, you're a person who's looking for the opportunity to celebrate life with other people. Now, I don't have time to necessarily go into that with every person, but I want you to look at what each of those terms says about you. It says something meaningful about your ambitions, your goals in life. Now, what I want you to do next is I want you to ask yourself a few questions as it relates to those words. Okay, so let me make this point first. Whatever you've put on there is extremely reasonable. As you look at those words, if you can remember them, every word on that list is perfectly reasonable. You know, every ambition was positive, nothing wrong with any of those ambitions, but we all had a little bit of difference in what it was that we were looking for. So whatever you're looking for, perfectly reasonable. I want you to get it. I hope you have lots of success in your efforts to get it. But here's what I want you to appreciate next. So in that quest for those desired outcomes, the quest to feel good, your quest now, which you may or may not have known, is to fulfill those ambitions. Those are the things that you are looking for every day as you go through the day. The other things certainly will validate you, but here are your preferences. Here are your biases. Young folks out there looking for research projects, equate this to the goals that people have, because you will find that when we look at a person's lifestyle goals, consistently you will find they will relate to the desire for affirmation, the desire to be free from stress, the desire to be loved. So our goals will relate to these endpoints. But now we need to ask a few questions. So I want you to consider these questions relative to your ambitions. So number one, what's going to have to occur in your life for that desired state to be fulfilled? So if you're looking for comfort, if you were looking for freedom from stress, well, what are you going to have to do in order to meet that objective? If what you're looking for is joy, well, what exactly does joy mean, and how are you going to meet it? What will you have to do in order to celebrate that experience of joy? If you're looking for intimacy, well, what does that mean to you? And what now is going to be necessary in order for you to achieve your ambition? Because the simple fact is, it's a quest. Those outcomes are not human defaults. They are the outcomes of our efforts. Next, how dependent is that desired state on the behavior and the compliance of other people? So if you're seeking comfort, to what extent do people have to leave you alone to allow you that comfort? To what extent do other people have to comply with some of your expectations in order to free you from challenges, in order to revel in that comfort? If you're looking for intimacy, what do other people have to do to validate your striving for intimacy? And I would imagine that what you will all see is a lot, that a lot of what we want is very much tied in to our relationships with other people. This simply underscoring the fact that we humans are socially embedded, we are social beings. The truth is, most of the pain and misery that you will experience in your life is going to be directly or indirectly a result of relationships. Similarly, so's the joy. The joy of your life is going to come through your relationships. Just as an observation in the work I'm doing with the veterans, I see so many veterans who find interacting with other people unpleasant. So what they do is they avoid all interactions with other people. They get their disability benefits and they stay at home and feel horrible, miserable, unfulfilled. The point that I have to make to them is your desire for joy is reasonable, but it's going to occur on the other side of the door, not locked up in your house. So we're going to have to prepare you for all the hardships that are involved in dealing with other people. So here are the questions. How likely are others to comply? Keeping in mind that other people have their own agendas. They have their own ambitions. If you have a partner in your life, if you take the desired state inventory or pick your 3 words, they'll pick 3 words too. Not likely the same 3 or 4 words. So now we already have a little bit of conflict that's going to require a little bit of negotiation. So it's certainly good, and I want to emphasize this, for everybody to sort of know what they're looking for. If you know what you're looking for, it's going to be easier. If your partner knows what he or she is looking for and what you're looking for, now we have a workable negotiation. Might they be unwilling to accommodate to your desires? They may not. They may not. And we get ourselves in a lot of trouble sometimes because we assume other people, listen to this next word carefully, we assume that other people should know what we want and should give us what they want. They may not even really know what it is. And even if they do, doesn't mean they're necessarily going to give it to you. So the next question is, well, why should they comply? Well, because they're your partner. All right, I'll buy that. I don't think we're going to be able to make a whole lot of it in a lot of cases. Some people, that's true. But the problem is they may not want to comply. So that's a little tricky. So is what you want realistic? Is it reasonable? I've already validated the fact that it is reasonable in the sense that what you want is certainly fine. But here's the problem. Those things aren't defaults. We have to work for them. Now, let me ask you another question related to that. Or let me stay on this for a second. I want you to appreciate the difference between hope, expectations, and entitlements. It gets us in a whole lot of trouble. So every day when I get up in the morning, I hope my desired state is fulfilled. I have a rough idea of what that means. I like it to come in a lot of different ways, but I do like affirmation. I do like appreciation, and I do like my comfort. All right. Now, let's think for a minute about the conflict between those two. What I want is appreciation, affirmation. All right. I want the people who I work with say, thank you, Dr. Rasmussen. That was very helpful. It's all I need. All I need. Talk to my daughters. All I need is my daughters to say thank you. Not that much. But I also want comfort and validation. So if I want comfort, I'm going to have to do a lot of things to get there. It means I have to take care of a bunch of stuff. And if I want affirmation and appreciation, I'm going to have to do things that people appreciate and that will warrant affirmation, which might conflict with my desire for comfort. Oh, this is a dilemma that I'm in right off the bat. So that brings up the next question. So the next question is, how often do you need to experience this outcome to feel that you are successfully fulfilled? Actually, now let me back up. I got myself out of sequence here. I apologize. All right. So every day I get up and I hope that I will get my desired state fulfilled. I hope I will be appreciated. I hope I will get to experience comfort. Here's where we get ourselves in trouble a lot of times, is that we expect to experience our desired state. I expect things to go well. I hope they go well, but as soon as I start to expect them to go well, I start to make myself vulnerable. Because to the extent that I expect to be affirmed, to the extent that I expect to be appreciated, to revel in intimacy, to feel comfortable, to be free from stress, I now am living at a high degree of dependency on what others do. So I need to be careful with my expectations. Now, as I joke with my veterans too, I want to be free of stress. I want to drive comfortably. When I drive down the road every morning to go to the hospital, I want people to appreciate the fact that I do noble work. And I want you all to appreciate the nobility of my work. I help veterans. Now that's noble work. And because I do noble work, I think everybody else on the highway should get the hell out of my way. Because I'm entitled to a free pass to the hospital because I do noble work. Now, as soon as I start to feel entitled to outcomes, I'm in really desperate straits, because most of the people on the highway, given that I live near a military base, most of them are veterans. And they're going to think that their work is more noble than mine. Some of them are active duty military. They think theirs is even more noble. So the point of this is we have to be careful with our entitlements and our expectations. But as you all know, we don't ever want to lose hope. We just have to be reasonable with our expectations, which brings up my next point. How often do you need to experience this outcome to feel that you are successfully fulfilled in your objective? What percentage of your day needs to include those desired state outcomes in order for you to feel successful? Now, I'm aware of the fact that I'm speaking to a group of Adlerians who are usually pretty reasonable with these sorts of things, but we're going to take this information and work with people who are probably far less reasonable in these expectations. I often will ask people that I work with, how much do they need every day to feel fulfilled? And they will tell me all the time. Well, here's what I know. They're not going to get it. And I think I'm a pretty good therapist, and I think I help people quite a bit. But I can say with some confidence, I have never gotten anybody to the point that they feel validated and fulfilled all the time. I have got them to the point that they feel it more often, but none of them all the time. So we have to be a little bit careful. So this brings up the next topic. Some of you have already heard about this, but let me talk about this character right here for a minute. Some of you know about this guy, Vilfredo Pareto. And I want you all just to say out loud the name Vilfredo Pareto, because it's just really fun to say. Vilfredo Pareto. I really wish I'd been Italian. It just sounds so fun. All right, Vilfredo Pareto, 1848 to 1923. So he was essentially a 19th century economist in Italy. And what Pareto is famous for was that in the late 1800s, he did an assessment of the economic balance in Italy in the late 1800s. And here's what he found. He found that 80% of all the money in Italy was controlled by 20% of the people. How horrible is that? Now, wouldn't it be great if we had that now? It's gotten so much worse. But Pareto discussed what has become known as the Pareto principle. And he said that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from about 20% of the causes. Some of you have heard of the 80-20 rule. You see it all over the place. If you're a member of a church that requires donations from parishioners, 80% of the money that supports a church is given by 20% of the churchgoers. 80% of the work done in a corporate environment is done by 20% of the employees. 80% of the trouble caused by teenagers is caused by 20% of the teenagers. Roughly speaking, this 80-20 rule tends to play itself out. So I was curious about this several years ago, and I've talked about this. This is, as I said, Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. And here is the truth of things. If I asked you, for instance, how much of your day are you willing to let be the burdens of life, and how much is the joy? When I ask my veterans how much BS, and just so you know, BS stands for the burdensome stuff that we have to overcome. How much burden are you willing to tolerate in a day and still conclude that it's a good day? When I ask my veterans this question, they'll consistently say 10%, 15%. Every once in a while, I'll get one of them who says, oh, I can tolerate 40 or 50%, and feel very noble in their tolerance of all this burden. But here's the truth of it. 80% of our day, average person, average day, average life, 80% of our day is going to be spent just dealing with the BS, dealing with the burdens of life. 20% of our day, we're going to be celebrating the good stuff. Now, what's the good stuff? The good stuff is the desired state. It's all those terms on that form I showed you earlier. It's your desire for affirmation, for fulfillment, for joy, for love, for intimacy. These are the things that you want. And the reality is 20% of your day, you're going to be aware of being in them. Doesn't mean that you're not loved when you're not feeling loved, but only about 20% of our day are we going to be reveling in the joys of our success. Now, I was curious about this several years ago, so I just wanted to share with you real quick some research that we did. So years ago, when I was still a professor, I had students monitor their emotional states throughout the day. This was before smartphones. But what I did is I gave everybody watches, and I programmed these watches to randomly go off. And during the day, the students would when the watch went off, fill out a profile of mood states inventory. Some of you may know that test, but it's just an inventory to see how are you feeling in this particular moment. Because we wanted to see if this 80-20 rule played out. And here's what we found. Now, these are college students. They may not represent the world, and this may not be true to you, but it's pretty close. Here's what we found. 24% of their day was spent feeling peaceful, relaxed, joyful, laughing, having a good time, feeling love, feeling enthusiastic, or playing, having fun. 24% of their day. 26% of their day, they were bored, neutral, or tired. So not in the good stuff. I wouldn't necessarily call that the bad stuff, the burdensome stuff. It's just clearly not the good stuff. 30%, 36% of their time, remember these are college students, anxious, i.e. stressed, depressed, sad, frustrated, angry, annoyed, hurt, or embarrassed. Those were the common experiences felt about 36% of the time. Now, again, when you think, well, these are college students, they're sort of unique. Yeah, well, so are parents of young children unique. So are professors looking for tenure sort of unique. So are administrators of an international institute unique. So we all got our challenges. So these things tend to play out. Good news is only 13% of the time were they in a truly miserable state, despairing, miserable, anguished, infuriated. For those who have taken classes with me on emotions, you know, anguished is that really dangerous emotion that gets us in so much trouble. But here's the point that we demonstrated in this study. 80% of the time, we're not in our desired state. 80% of the time, we're trying to get there. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind. 80% of our time, we're getting where we want to be. 20% of our time, we're celebrating it. Now, for those of you who may have been exposed to this before, you might know something about this 80-20 rule that's sort of unfortunate. And the reality of it is that the 80%, anxious, depressed, frustrated, annoyed, whatever it might be, those periods tend to come in chunks. So they might last an hour, 15 minutes, maybe the afternoon. And the joys, the peaceful, the relaxed, the joyful, the playful, the enthusiastic, occur often in moments. So when you are looking for comfort, you have it throughout the day, just often not as sustained as you might like it to be. You feel love throughout the day, but a lot of times when you are being affirmed and told that you are loved, you're so busy doing other things, you miss it. So one of the things that we certainly want people to do is to appreciate when they are in their desired state. So a lot of times as I'm working with people, I get them to start looking for it, start monitoring it, because you probably miss it because you get so caught up in the BS that you miss the GS. And I want us to appreciate that. And you can all stop for just a moment and consider yourself. Where is my desired state being fulfilled that I may not fully appreciate? Because I'll bet you're getting a lot more of it than you realize. All right, so now let's talk about this character who we all admire so much. Now, we know what we want. So you have a sense now of what it is that you're after. Every morning when you get up, you know what you're looking for. These feelings of fulfillment, of goal attainment that are confirmed. When your goal is fulfilled, you feel joy, you feel affirmation, you feel appreciation. You feel these things that say you are having success. So the question now is, what am I going to have to do to maximize my experience of these feelings that I desire? And perhaps this is a point of some discussion. Let me say again, if it doesn't feel good, it isn't good. We will endure a lot of burdens, but we only endure those burdens if we think they are associated with some form of affirmation, appreciation, joy, celebration at the end. Most of you have endured the burdens of getting a college degree. You did a lot of work. There were times where you thought maybe you would drop out, but you kept going because you knew there was going to be a moment of validation and joy at the end. So we are after this opportunity to feel good about our lives. Well, here's one of the beauties of Adler's theory. I think you all do a good job of recognizing these, but I am often intrigued by how often people will give lip service to the life task. Not point any fingers. I will ask you to just evaluate your own sense of this. But Adler said there are things that we need to take care of. Quoting him, for a long time now, I have been convinced that all the questions of life can be subordinated to the three major problems: the problems of communal life, of work, and of love, the three life tasks. I will tell you that in my work, I spent a lot of time talking about life tasks. So what are the original? The task of self-sustenance. And what is the task of self-sustenance? It's sort of Maslow's basic needs. I've got to be able to feed myself, protect myself, shelter myself. So I've got to do these things in order to sustain my survival. We could talk about this more because I need to sustain my survival in a socially and ecologically responsible fashion. But we know this to be the work task. Now, what I want everybody to appreciate for a moment, you won't relate to this that well yourselves because you're so good at this, because I know so many of you, but we're still burdened by the need to do these things. We're used to doing them. We don't mind doing them. We find joy often in doing them. But at the time, these are work. These are difficult. These are burdens that we have to overcome day to day. All right. Second task, the task of social engagement. We are socially embedded. We live with other people. We have to learn to get along with others. The social task. The task of intimacy. Sex and love, we can talk about intimacy from both of those perspectives. I'll talk about it in a moment. And as we all know, this must be done with community feeling, with social interest. A lot of times people talk about these separately, and I want to encourage us always to remember that as we're meeting these life tasks, we have to do it with social interest. So in the work task, if my work is such that I am creating ecological damage, well, then that is not work with social interest. So that work needs to be attended to. And then I have been talking more and more recently about the task of imperfection. Now, don't panic that I'm not trying to propose an additional life task. But here is the reality of all of this. We will do all of these, including act with social interest, imperfectly. Every day, as you are striving to fulfill your desired state, you will make some mistakes. Things will not go well. It won't play out like you want. You will have to face things that are difficult. We had better be prepared to deal with the inevitable imperfections that are part of our quest to feel good. Now, I want to break these down a little bit. Many of you have been exposed to this, but here's the question. What's it going to take? We know what we want. We've identified our desired state. We know that Adler said there are certain things that you're going to have to take care of along the way to meet your desired objective. So what really is it going to take in order for us to fulfill these life tasks? I've spoke about this before. I want to speak about it again. So here's where let me back off a little bit, because this has profound implications for our parenting. So it's not just that we're working with adults, we are doing this as we're working with parents as well. In 2014, I published an article referring to what I called the task, the challenges, and the obstacles in parent education. And I want to take a moment to refer to that. Many of you have heard this before. Many of you have thought about this, but maybe not put it quite in this context. But what is the task of parenting, child guidance? What are the challenges? And what are the obstacles? And one of the things I have made note of is a lot of times in our parent training exercises, we are addressing the challenges, not so much the task, or we assume we're addressing the task when in fact we may not be. So I think it's really important that we be aware of the task, the challenges, and the obstacles. So what are the tasks of parenting? Well, let me pull up the next slide. Here is the simple task of parenting. We're seeing people from all over the world in this presentation. This is so cool. This is so exciting. And every parent, wherever you live, I will argue, has the same task. And the task of parenting is to prepare the next generation of civil adults. To the extent that we fail to do that, we're in trouble. We have to learn to get along with one another. Adler said the challenge of our time is cooperation. He said that from the beginning. It stayed consistent throughout. Dreikurs has embellished it. The task of parenting is to prepare the next generation of civil adults. It's not just prepare them for adulthood. That's a little vague. It's to prepare them to be members of a civil community. What are the challenges? Children don't necessarily want to be civil adults. What they want is what they want when they want it. So they resist. A lot of times our parent training programs are just helping them to manage that infantile orientation of I want what I want, but we need to do that always with an understanding of what is the ultimate task. Will this help them to be responsible members of a civil society? And then what are the obstacles? Well, if you're a parent, you are probably producing children at a time in life that you would still like to be dancing, that you would still like to be going out and partying and making love and having a really good time in life. And you know, if you've had children, nothing gets in the way of that more than children. You also learned very quickly that not only do they take a lot of your time, they take a lot of your money. And these are the challenges. We're also trying to do this in a society that has considerable challenges. So we're trying to teach our children to be civil, to be polite, to act with social interest in societies that often perpetuate selfishness and self-bounded greed. It's challenging. So as we're raising our children, we need to think about, how do I overcome the obstacles? How do I meet the challenges? How do I fulfill the task? All right, well, this brings up this next topic that I will keep harping on for my career. 20 more years, and then I'm done. Psychological muscle. So I want to talk about the aspects of psychological muscle. Many of you know that I use the term here, RC2, to represent the notion of psychological muscle. Well, what are the components of psychological muscle? All right, let me go over these. First aspect of psychological muscle is a sense of responsibility, the first R in RC2. We all have to have the willingness to do what is necessary to sustain the self and most effectively overcome the problems, even when it's unpleasant. Here is my observation of working with veterans. They don't like responsibility. It's unpleasant to them. It's a burden. It's something they want to avoid. So they often can, if they are able to get benefits or for whatever reasons. But here's the thing I just want us to keep in mind. Being responsible is work. It's difficult. It's burdensome. There are things that we need to do that we simply don't want to do. It's 9:47 here. I have things today that I need to do. I don't want to do them, but I need to do them. Now the question is, do I have the psychological muscle to do the things that I need to do? And you will find quite often that people do not. Here are some terms that relate to responsibility. This is a word. Responsibility comes in the form of concern, reliability, frugality, accountable, obligated, self-control, judicious, task-focused, bold, duty, trustworthy, dependable. I use the word responsible because it seems to be most convenient, but there are a lot of ideas and terms that relate to it. Second aspect of psychological muscle is that of cooperation. We must have, and our children must have, the willingness to have a good relationship with others, which includes the willingness to cooperate in the betterment of a group and to form friendships. This requires effort, sacrifice, and compromise. Think of all the burdens of having to be cooperative. Being cooperative means I don't get to do everything I want to do, and I have to make a lot of sacrifices that I may not want to make. All right, here are terms that relate to cooperation. A cooperative person is collaborative, they aid, they're supportive, gracious, very important word, helpful, kind, teamwork, friendly, sociable, patient, assistance. All these ideas relate to the task of being cooperative, and these are the things that we have to teach our children. Now, let me make sure I make this point clear. If you reach adulthood without these qualities, you will face a lot of distress, a lot of burdens that you will need help overcoming. Next aspect of psychological muscle is respect. I've made the point, and we'll make it here, that, well, let me back up for just a sec. Respect, the willingness to avoid doing anything that would compromise the well-being, integrity of another living being, and not allowing others to compromise your own well-being and integrity. George Washington once said that no problem in life ever becomes more than it needs to be as long as we maintain an attitude of respect. So as long as I respect myself, as long as I respect anybody that I'm interacting with, if a conflict occurs, the problem will never get worse than it needs to be if both parties maintain respect. As soon as one or the other starts to abandon respect, then we start adding different burdens to the nature of the conflict. So the second R is respect. And then third, well, let's see, here we go. More words of respect. To nurture, to encourage, critical word for us, reverence, graciousness, admiration, protection, patience, forgiveness is an act of respect, value, care, accept, esteem, veneration. I would make the argument, I won't embellish it here, but maybe it's worthy of discussion, that our kin-keeping ideas and our self-care life tasks that people have talked about at different times are really just aspects of self and other respect. So I need to have respect for those that are in my care. I need to respect myself, take care of my psychology, my physiology, and my spirit. All of those are acts of respect. And then the fourth aspect of psychological muscle is courage. Courage, the willingness to move forward with social interest despite the compelling energy to avoid or escape the task. I think of my younger adulthood and all the social anxiety that I felt because I was so afraid of being imperfect, of doing things to make myself look foolish. And I'm sure I missed a lot of opportunities for growth because of my lack of courage. We need to have the courage to face periodic failure and disappointment, to face periodic, unavoidable imperfection. And this is why I make the point that it's, in a sense, a task of life, because imperfection is unavoidable. Therefore, we better be prepared to face it. Like I said, I'm not prepared to make that argument formally, but I think you all get the point. All right, so courage. What are some ideas related to courage? I love the word pluck, daring, forgiveness, bravery, mettle, willingness, nerve, boldness, valor, guts, audacity, resolution. These are just in English. In your language, you have all sorts of words that relate to the qualities of courage that we want to help our children, our patients, our clients to develop. So what are the aspects of psychological muscle, or what is the advantage of psychological muscle? The four qualities: responsibility, cooperation, respect, and courage, RC2. Now let me skip ahead here and let's talk about the benefits of psychological muscle. With responsibility, if I'm a person who learns to meet my responsibilities, then I come to be able to sustain myself. If I can sustain myself, I don't have the burdens of dependency. Think of how many people you have worked with in your life who come to see you because of their dependency and their need to rely on others for basic life support issues. They must compromise themselves. They must violate their own self-respect. They get a sense of identity. How many of you identify yourself through your work? Not exclusively, but importantly. So when I ask you, who are you? You might say, I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist, I'm a professor. I'm something that relates to what you do to sustain yourself. We also get, through our ability to meet our responsibilities, the sense of counting and the feeling of being capable. Now, I hope this will generate some discussion later on, because I find these to be wonderfully complementary, which we'll assume, but these are heuristics that people might view differently, and I respect that. All right, next, cooperation. If I develop the ability to get along with people, I get to revel in the joys of connection, sense of belonging, sense of community, and sense of friendship. So in order for me to have a friend, as Thoreau said, in order to have a friend, I first have to learn how to be a friend. I have to learn how to be cooperative in order to revel in the benefits and the joys of friendship. Let's see. Next, respect. What do I get if I learn to be respectful? If I learn to be respectful, I get to revel in the joys of true intimacy, not just sexual intimacy, but true intimacy, feelings of love, a sense of integrity, and certainly the opportunity to feel that I count, that I matter. I would love us to think about that a little bit more. One of the reasons we have a need for intimacy is because of the inherent realities of inferiority, our imperfections. We need somebody in our life who is ready to reaffirm us when we face the inevitable challenges of life. That is one of the joys of intimacy. It's not just sex, it's not just procreation, it is the opportunity to know you have a source of reaffirmation as we go through the burdens of life. It is so critical. All right, next, courage. What do we get with courage? Confidence, competence, growth, and expanding courage. The point I make to my veterans all the time is nobody builds courage by sitting on a couch. Courage can only be built off the couch and engaged in life. So to build courage, we have to be out and engaged and face the risk of our imperfections. All right, let me bring this all together into a connection of things that you will recognize, and I welcome discussion on this. Here are the tasks: self-sustenance, work, getting along with others, living communally, controlling our impulses, love, sex, and facing imperfections. What are the qualities that are going to be needed? Responsibility, cooperation, respect, and courage. And what's the outcome? As we all know, we love this. You feel capable, you feel connected, you feel like you count, and you build your courage. Now, these, as I said, are heuristics. Use them as you want to use them, but there might be some differences in thinking about one more than the other. So here's the reality of life. We know what we want. We want our desired state to be fulfilled. I want to feel affirmed. I want to feel loved. I want to feel validated. Look at this. This is great. Oh, well, there we go. I want all of these outcomes that affirm my joy in life, that are part of my quest to feel good, but our success will require muscle. As I point out to the supervisees that I work with, in a lot of ways, as a counselor, you are like a physical trainer. A person comes to you and they are not as healthy as they could be, and they want to get healthy. You are going to help them build the muscle they need in order to revel in the joys of psychological health. So let me summarize this before we get into maybe some discussion on it. Number one, let's know what we want. We clarified that. You have a reasonable sense of what it is that you're looking for day in and day out. Remember those 3 or 4 words, revisit that every once in a while, and remind yourself or see if those words still play out. Understand that what you want, the desire to feel good about yourself, to feel good about your life, is perfectly reasonable. The critical question is, how do you go about it? It's not what you want, it's how you go about it. And you have to remind yourself, you're not going to get it all the time, but that's okay. Because the better you know what you want, the better equipped you are to get it, the more often you'll be in a position to revel in it. Can't have it all the time. With psychological muscle, you can have it more often. And remember that this is a process of womb to tomb, meaning that you don't build the muscle and then rest on your laurels for the rest of your life. Every stage of your life will require the commitment to the refinement and reassurance of your psychological muscle. All right, last thing I'm going to share with you. Now I got 2 more things to share with you. Here's what we would all like. A lot of times, maybe we would all like this. I don't think I would. We all want our lives to be like the guy on the top. A lot of people do. I want a nice, smooth ride. to the finish line with no trouble. But instead, life is really the guy on the bottom. But I want you all to look at something here and ask yourself, which of these two characters, the guy on the top or the guy on the bottom, achieves the most in life? Clearly the one on the bottom. And the next thing I want you to consider is which of these two characters has the most victories? And a lot of times when people look at this picture, they look at all the trouble, they look at all the burden on the bottom scene. What they often don't see are all the victories that were available to the guy on the bottom that weren't available to the person on the top. So this is the nature of life. We all want our victories. We all want to celebrate. We all want to feel fulfilled. Bless our hearts, it's perfectly reasonable. The quality of our life is going to be in how we go about it. We need to be realistic, understanding that there are burdens we will have to endure, and we won't get it all the time. But you know what? That's okay, because the smarter we are, the better we commit to our life tasks, the more often that we're going to get to experience. So I'm done there.